Now we have a really special treat. A high school sophomore named Jacob Simmons, who lives outside of Salt Lake City, for a project in the Utah State History Competition, put together a 10-minute video, as was required in the contest, and he won first prize in the state of Utah. And in a few weeks, he will be coming to Washington to compete in the National History Competition. And the subject of his prize, or prize-winning video, was Louis Brandeis. And so with his assistance and consent, we're going to show you his video.
As a lawyer, he practiced with integrity. As a reformer, he stood for the common man. As a Zionist, he ignited a revolution that would affect millions. And as a judge, he practiced what he preached. In a single lifetime, Louis Brandeis took a stand on thousands of issues across 4 careers, always benefiting the working man and forever changing American jurisprudence. Louis D. Brandeis, standing for the people. Louis Brandeis was born on November 13, 1856 in Louisville, Kentucky. His parents were German Jewish immigrants who valued education and culture. At the age of 20, Brandeis graduated with record-setting grades from Harvard Law School. Shortly after, he opened a law firm in Boston with classmate Samuel Warren. In his ensuing 36 years as a lawyer, Brandeis held true to several basic principles. He only accepted cases he believed in. He made sure he knew the facts of a case, and he put his client's monetary interests before his own. By doing this, Brandeis consistently stood for his beliefs, his client's beliefs, and worked to find a square deal for everyone involved. It was in this manner that he came to be known as the best lawyer in Boston, and as one banker wrote, "There's a man who will give you $1's worth for every dollar paid. He'll give you straight advice, and he generally wins." In 1891, Brandeis married his second cousin Alice Goldmark. After marriage, Brandeis decided that he wanted to give back to the society that made him so successful, so he assigned the bulk of the paid law work to the associates at his firm and began dedicating an increasing amount of his time to public service. This paradigm launched Brandeis into participation in dozens of major reforms throughout the 1890s and 1900s. Brandeis always fought on behalf of the working man, stood against bigness in government and business, and advocated for individual liberty and privacy. Brandeis often faced stiff opposition from rich and powerful companies and organizations, and found himself an outcast from Boston's elite circles. Despite this, he continued to stay true to his beliefs. He was a natural leader, and his colleagues had a great deal of respect for him, as he presided with fairness and always listened to both sides of an argument before passing judgment. In these social, economic, and political reforms, the actions of Brandeis and his fellow reformers often resulted in change for the benefit of the working man. These reforms included spoiling a corruption plot to save the Boston subway, incorporating labor unions, which neutralized the weapons of unfair unions but also allowed unions to keep employers in check, dramatically decreasing the price of gas by breaking up Boston Consolidated Gas Company, enforcing public safety by breaking up the New Haven Railroad monopoly, providing 15 million people with affordable life insurance by igniting an insurance reform with the foundation of Savings Bank Life Insurance, conserving resources in Alaska, and when in the face of several major garment strikes, Brandeis negotiated higher wages and improved working conditions while also giving the owners labor stability. Brandeis's contribution to workers of the time as well as to the legal practice forever is exemplified in Mueller v. Oregon, where Brandeis wrote a brief supporting restricted working hours for women. In preparing this brief, Brandeis used an unprecedented technique. Rather than legal arguments, Brandeis focused on social science and economics to detail how long hours adversely affected women. Brandeis won the case, and this brief was coined the Brandeis Brief. Brandeis would write several other briefs in this manner, including Stetler v. O'Hara, which detailed why Oregon ought to enforce a minimum wage. He won this case and continued to fight for a minimum wage, until a federal minimum wage was finally enacted in 1938, enabling workers everywhere to better provide for themselves and their families. The format of these briefs would eventually revolutionize the way law was practiced. For example, Thurgood Marshall's brief in Brown v. Board of Education was a Brandeis brief focusing on facts to explain how segregated schools adversely affected black children. Although it is common knowledge that the case to desegregate schools was won, it is often lost to the annals of history that this probably wouldn't have been possible without Brandeis's contributions to the legal practice. The reform work that Brandeis did in these years would be the start of pro bono work, or work that a lawyer does for free to help those with limited means of affording an attorney. The idea of pro bono work is brand new. Brandeis practically invents it.
He observed the importance of service as part of the social contract of living in the world, and that became a model for the legal profession. Our law school has adopted that as an important principle, and our students do 30 hours of public service before they graduate.
In 1910, Brandeis was approached by Jacob de Haas, who introduced him to the Zionist movement. Brandeis soon realized that Zionism represented his ideals, and starting in 1911, Brandeis undertook a major leadership role, traveling the country to persuade Jews to join the movement. By 1916, he had transformed the American Zionist movement from a moribund organization into a powerful political presence.
He gave the Zionist cause a legitimacy that it did not have previously, because here was a well-known public figure in the United States who was not a religious zealot. In fact, he was not religious at all. He was Jewish, but he was not a practicing Jew. From a public relations perspective, as I say, I think he gave it a credibility and legitimacy that it did not have before.
Throughout his life, Brandeis made several other important contributions to Zionism, including convincing President Wilson to recognize a Jewish state in Palestine, attending conferences in Europe, and working closely with President Roosevelt throughout the 1930s towards getting the British to give the Jews Palestinian land. The movement that Brandeis revolutionized in America would help lead to the creation of Israel. In 1916, Brandeis was nominated to the Supreme Court by Woodrow Wilson. Brandeis accepted the nomination, believing that the best way for him to help the common man was by serving on the court. His nomination was opposed by many, including those who believed he was a radical and those who were simply anti-Semitic. After 4 months of contentious arguments, Brandeis finally became the first Jew accepted to the United States Supreme Court. Throughout his time on the court, Brandeis wrote 454 opinions. Each had a classic Brandeisian twist, and all were written in an effort to make life better for the common man. Many of these opinions had a profound effect on American jurisprudence, including New State Ice Company v. Liebman, in which Brandeis famously coined the term states as laboratories of democracy, as well as Whitney v. California, where Brandeis took a strong stand for free speech, and in doing so, put together the basis of modern First Amendment statute. Another extremely important opinion came when Brandeis reinvented Fourth Amendment jurisprudence in his dissent in Olmsted v. United States. In this opinion, along with the article entitled The Right to Privacy, written with Sam Warren in 1890, Brandeis took a strong stand for the right to privacy. The ideas Brandeis pioneered in these writings have been used in many important cases, including Roe v. Wade, which gave women the right to have an abortion, and Obergefell v. Hodges, which guaranteed same-sex couples the right to marry.
The Olmsted decision that wrote later on the court about wiretapping and privacy was also significant because it recognized that people should have an expectation of privacy. The word privacy is not in the Constitution, and it has become a constitutional right primarily because of Brandeis.
During President Wilson's first term, Brandeis wrote a series of essays called Other People's Money. In these essays, Brandeis objected to the power that bankers held, including J.P. Morgan, who controlled more than 40% of American capital. He described the way that these bankers handled other people's money as financial recklessness. He would continue to describe the problem as the curse of bigness, and in these essays, Brandeis predicted the stock market crash of 1929. As Norman Hapgood wrote, the fatalities following 1929 came to a large extent from failure to act on the principles sharply drawn in Other People's Money. Eventually, President Roosevelt used some of the policies that Brandeis outlined in his book as stepping stones to lift the country out of the Great Depression. The financial reforms of the 1930s that Brandeis inspired helped to ensure financial stability for the next half a century, which was marked by the lowest bank failure rate in American history. This stability would only falter once Brandeis's policy, the Glass-Steagall Act, was dismantled in 1999, leading to the financial crash of 2008. Under Obama's administration, there was even discussion in Congress about reinstating the Glass-Steagall Act to help resolve the recession. Louis Brandeis's life is a perfect case study of what it means to take a stand. Throughout his life, one can find a seamlessness between what he believed and what he did, always fighting for the working man and always upholding his moral standards. As a lawyer, he used facts and integrity to gain the respect of the profession. As a reformer, he made life better for the working man, fighting in nearly every major reform of the progressive era and revolutionizing legal tactics that are still popular today. His participation in the Zionist movement may have been crucial to the foundation of Israel, and perhaps most importantly, Brandeis stood for individual rights and freedoms, outlining ideas and his opinions that are still used by justices from Scalia to Ginsburg.
The man's entire professional life consisted of taking a stand. I think a lot of people will have a moment in their lives when they take a stand, and that can be really impressive. But that's what this man's entire life was about.